Camilla Parker Bowles has endured a particularly difficult few weeks, and according to well-placed sources, the challenges appear destined to intensify rather than subside. A significant story is unfolding within the corridors of Buckingham Palace, one that carries the weight of 3 decades of unresolved tensions. At its center stands an unexpected alliance between Princess Anne and Prince William, directed toward the woman who sits beside King Charles at every official engagement, the woman who transitioned from decades as the other woman to Queen Consort. Those close to the palace indicate that her position holds far less security than Camilla might wish the world to perceive. This development invites mature reflection on the enduring consequences of personal choices within an institution bound by duty and legacy. It began with a specific incident that drew the attention of insiders. Roughly 3 weeks prior, a senior palace aide placed a phone call described as highly unusual. The recipient was not a member of the press nor a government official, but a lawyer acting on behalf of Princess Anne. The discussion concerned Camilla and concluded in under 10 minutes. It was concise and purposeful, the sort of exchange that occurs when a decision has already been reached and only confirmation remains. Sources view this call as the initial step in a larger sequence of events, one that had been building quietly over many years and now demanded acknowledgement. Princess Anne has belonged to the royal family for more than 70 years, carrying the accumulated weight of decades spent observing the intricate and often painful dynamics that define it. She has seen the full arc of her brother's relationships unfold in real time, from the early strains in his marriage to Diana through the public scandals, private separations, and the devastating finality of Diana's death. Anne managed her responses with the disciplined restraint that has characterized her public life, maintaining professional composure while privately processing events that touch the family deeply. Her perspective is not one of casual commentary, but of someone who witnessed the human costs behind the headlines, the emotional toll on children, the institutional pressures that shape decisions, and the long shadows those choices cast across generations. Now, in 2026, sources suggest that this lifetime of observation has led her to a point where silence no longer feels sufficient, prompting careful consideration of how history should be preserved and understood. Prince William's position has evolved markedly in recent years, transitioning from heir apparent to a figure exercising tangible authority over substantial resources. The Duchy of Cornwall, with its vast holdings valued at approximately £1.2 billion, encompassing extensive lands, properties, investments, and traditional estates managed across centuries, now falls under his direct oversight. No external approvals are required for key decisions. One of the earliest and most noted actions was the removal of Annabel Elliot from the duchy payroll. As Camilla's sister and an interior designer with nearly 2 decades of involvement in duchy projects, her contributions ended quietly once William assumed full control. In her place, William installed individuals drawn from his personal and trusted networks, including those connected to his children's lives. This shift, though executed without public drama, signaled a deliberate realignment of loyalties and priorities, one that observers inside the palace recognized as carrying broader implications for established relationships. The convergence between Princess Anne and Prince William represents a profound alignment of 2 distinct yet deeply intertwined worldviews shaped by decades of shared family history and personal experience. Anne, with her 70-plus years immersed in royal life, brings the perspective of a steadfast observer who has witnessed the full spectrum of triumphs and tragedies, including the unraveling of her brother's first marriage and its lasting repercussions. William, having endured the public and private trauma of losing his mother at a vulnerable age, now approaches his role with the maturity of a 43-year-old father and husband who controls significant institutional power. Sources close to the palace describe how William's decisive actions regarding the Duchy of Cornwall served as a catalyst, opening channels for candid conversations that had remained dormant for years. Both individuals, for reasons rooted in personal conviction rather than fleeting emotion, arrived at the conclusion that waiting was no longer viable. This partnership is not born of casual alliance, but of a mutual recognition that certain legacies demand active protection, and that the approaching 30th anniversary of Diana's death in 2027 adds particular urgency to their shared reflections on justice, memory, and institutional responsibility. Princess Anne's resolve has manifested in a deliberate and thoughtful engagement with the royal archives housed at Windsor Castle, a facility inaccessible to the public and protected from external scrutiny. This repository serves as the monarchy's private repository of truth, containing letters, diaries, memoranda, and internal communications that chronicle the unfiltered realities of royal life across generations. Anne's privileged level of access allows her to delve into materials from the 1980s and 1990s, place, a period marked by intense personal and institutional strain during Charles and Diana's marriage. Sources suggest her review is not impulsive but methodical, driven by a growing conviction that loyalty to the institution should not come at the expense of historical integrity. Having observed events firsthand, Anne appears determined to ensure that future accounts of this era reflect the complexities she witnessed, particularly the human dimensions that official narratives sometimes obscure. This engagement with the archives marks a significant personal threshold for a woman known for her discretion and duty. The depth of the archival records at Windsor Castle offers a window into the monarchy's private machinery during one of its most publicly turbulent eras, far exceeding the outlines familiar from books, documentaries, and media coverage. These materials include handwritten letters exchanged between principals and advisors, contemporaneous diary entries capturing emotional states and strategic discussions, internal memoranda detailing how concerns raised by Diana were received and categorized, and records of meetings where institutional priorities were weighed against personal welfare. Sources suggest the archives illuminate specific instances where protocol, image management, and familial considerations intersected, sometimes resulting in decisions that prioritize stability over immediate compassion. For Princess Anne, reviewing these documents is reportedly an act of bearing witness to nuances she observed from within the family circle, providing evidence of how information was controlled, how responsibilities were assigned, and how the long-term narrative was initially framed. This level of detail underscores her conviction that a complete historical record must encompass these internal dimensions rather than relying solely on polished public accounts, ensuring future generations understand the full context of institutional responses to profound personal crisis. Prince William's strategic use of financial authority through the Duchy of Cornwall demonstrates a calculated approach to power that respects the estate's ancient foundations while adapting it to contemporary realities. The Duchy, a self-sustaining portfolio of agricultural tenancies, luxury holiday accommodations, commercial leases, mineral rights, and extensive rural holdings, provides an annual income stream that allows independent decision-making without reliance on the sovereign grant or direct parental approval. Beyond the high-profile removal of Annabel Elliot, William has methodically reviewed and adjusted a range of arrangements, including supplier contracts, event participations, and collaborative projects that once facilitated broader access for Camilla's associates. These adjustments are executed with legal precision and operational discretion, avoiding dramatic gestures that could invite public scrutiny while steadily reshaping the network of influence surrounding the duchy. Insiders note that this methodical style reflects William's understanding of how sustained, incremental changes can achieve significant structural shifts, reinforcing loyalty structures aligned with his vision for the monarchy's future stewardship. Redirecting resources in Diana's spirit constitutes one of the most poignant aspects of William's current stewardship of the Duchy of Cornwall. Diana dedicated significant energy to causes that were considered unconventional or overly sensitive for royal involvement at the time, including pioneering work in mental health awareness, direct engagement with homeless communities, and compassionate advocacy for those affected by HIV and AIDS during an era of widespread stigma. William, now commanding an estate with annual revenues approaching £30 million and total assets exceeding £1.2 billion, has begun channeling targeted philanthropic support toward organizations and programs that echo these priorities. This redirection is executed thoughtfully, often through established trusts or collaborative initiatives that emphasize sustained impact rather than fleeting publicity. Sources indicate this approach serves a dual purpose, honoring his mother's legacy while demonstrating a deliberate contrast to periods when the institution resisted or constrained her efforts. Anne has reportedly expressed private satisfaction with these developments, viewing them as a responsible exercise of power that validates Diana's contributions and signals a more progressive orientation for royal philanthropy in the years ahead. The symbolic power of royal attributes extends well beyond aesthetics, functioning as carefully calibrated instruments of legitimacy, continuity, and public perception. When Camilla appeared in Westminster Abbey wearing the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, a piece closely associated with Queen Elizabeth and even featured on currency, it represented a deliberate assertion of her place within the monarchy's highest ceremonial traditions. Yet these symbols are not static. They pass between generations with profound implications. The same tiara is expected to one day grace Catherine's head, creating a moment of symbolic transfer that will effectively reframe its associations for a new chapter. Anne and William, with their intimate knowledge of royal protocol, recognize that such objects, along with patronages and ceremonial roles communicate volumes about hierarchy, belonging, and whose story is destined to endure. Their strategic awareness of this dimension informs a broader approach that treats symbols as active elements in shaping both internal dynamics and external narratives, ensuring that the visual language of the monarchy aligns with evolving priorities. Redistribution of patronages and influence represents a methodical exercise in reshaping the monarchy's public and charitable footprint. Following Queen Elizabeth II's death, the reallocation of her extensive portfolio, encompassing hundreds of organizations spanning arts, sports, health, education, and heritage, has provided opportunities for nuanced adjustments. Anne's reported participation in select decision processes has helped direct certain high-profile patronages away from Camilla, often justified through frameworks of strategic alignment, generational relevance, or operational efficiency rather than personal preference. These transitions occur discreetly within established administrative channels, avoiding announcements that might draw attention. The 2025 decision to extend royal warrant granting authority to William and Catherine further reinforced this evolution, publicly signaling where the Crown's endorsement power is now concentrated. Over time, such measures cumulatively diminish the scope and prestige of Camilla's accumulated associations while bolstering the platform for William and Catherine, illustrating how procedural and symbolic tools can achieve substantial influence realignment without overt confrontation. Crafting the official record of Charles III's reign is a deliberate and far-reaching process that will define historical understanding for generations. It encompasses choices about which photographs are elevated in prominence, how state visits and family milestones are displayed in exhibitions, which documentary projects receive royal backing, and what correspondence or materials enter permanent archives. Sources indicate that William and Anne's perspectives are actively shaping these decisions, influencing the narrative balance by determining degrees of visibility and contextual framing for different individuals. Royal tradition has long recognized that the preserved record becomes the foundation of legacy, where selective emphasis can elevate or diminish roles over time. For Camilla, this means her contributions are being situated within a broader historical continuum that includes the complexities of earlier decades rather than standing as an unchallenged pinnacle. This careful curation reflects a mature institutional approach that seeks to balance respect for the current reign with acknowledgement of its place in the longer arc of monarchical history. Personal toll on Camilla reveals itself gradually through a series of quiet losses and shifting circumstances that carry deep emotional and practical weight. The sale of Ray Mill House stands as particularly telling. This Wiltshire property, owned long before her marriage to Charles, regarded as her true private sanctuary, offered gardens she once described publicly as the best form of therapy, a space entirely separate from royal obligations. Its disposal without fanfare or accompanying lifestyle narrative suggests a fundamental reassessment of her future needs and attachments. At present, Camilla benefits from seamless access to the full spectrum of royal residences, including Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Sandringham, Balmoral, and others, enjoying the infrastructure of a reigning Queen Consort. However, this picture is temporary. Upon Charles's passing, major estates such as Sandringham and Balmoral will pass directly to William, while Buckingham Palace becomes the primary residence for William and Catherine. Camilla's status would shift to Queen Dowager, with access dependent on invitation rather than right. Her anticipated inheritance, centered on Clarence House, valued around £72 million, and Highgrove around £39 million, represents substantial assets by ordinary standards, but remains wholly inadequate as a substitute for the comprehensive position and support she currently enjoys. Sources describe her contemplation of this arithmetic as marked by clear-eyed realism, recognition that she faces a transition from central figure with institutional backing to a more peripheral role at the discretion of a man shaped by childhood experiences of her involvement in his mother's suffering. This awareness reportedly contributes to a private sense of erosion, not through one dramatic event, through the steady accumulation of changes that redefine her daily reality and long-term security. Narrowing of family connections has unfolded systematically, affecting the broader Parker Bowles network in ways both professional and social. Annabel Elliott's removal from the Duchy of Cornwall payroll served as an early and visible indicator, but the pattern extends further. Tom Parker Bowles has reportedly seen his access to certain royal spaces and events curtailed following incidents such as those at Balmoral, while other family members experience quieter reductions in invitations to official and semi-official occasions. Camilla dedicated approximately 20 years to carefully building these associations, weaving her children and siblings into the institutional fabric after her marriage. Current process of contraction, characterized by patient, incremental adjustments rather than sudden exclusions, reflects William's deliberate exercise of control over resources and events under his influence. Nothing generates immediate headlines, but the cumulative effect becomes unmistakable. Steady diminishment of proximity and opportunity. Sources characterize this as demonstrating genuine long-term intent, prioritizing institutional loyalty, future alignment over established personal and familial ties, leaving Camilla to witness the gradual dismantling of the network she worked to establish. Complication of external associations centers primarily on Camilla's long-standing friendship with Sarah Ferguson, which has become an increasingly difficult liability for her to manage within the current palace environment. Ferguson's name appears in files released by the United States Department of Justice concerning Jeffrey Epstein. Though there is no evidence of criminal wrongdoing on Ferguson's part, documented association carries reputational weight, especially amid the ongoing institutional fallout from Prince Andrew's situation and arrest. William has reportedly communicated his position with clarity to Camilla. She must distance herself publicly and permanently from Ferguson, face the consequences of continued close association. Camilla has not fully complied, finding the demand both personally impossible and fundamentally unfair, given that the friendship predates her royal marriage by many years, and represents one of the few consistent private relationships in her life. This unresolved standoff, sources suggest, costing Camilla measurable influence inside the palace. Every week it lingers, reinforces perceptions among key figures that her judgment regarding potential risks to the institution may not align with the standards required of someone in her elevated position. The situation exemplifies the challenges of balancing private loyalties formed outside royal life, the heightened scrutiny and expectations that come with being Queen Consort. Charles's difficult position is one of the most human and painful dimensions of the entire story. In February of this year, placed a phone call to Anne that sources describe as one of the most challenging conversations between the siblings in decades. It was not heated or accusatory, but quiet, filled with evident pain. Exchange of a man who understands precisely what his sister is doing, why she is doing it, finds himself unable to argue against it with any real conviction. 76 years old, diagnosed with cancer in February 2024 with treatment continuing through 2025, Charles has maintained his public duties with discipline. However, discipline is not the same as robust strength. The energy required to manage complex, multi-front family dynamics has clearly diminished. Protecting Camilla more actively would demand that he tell William to restore access and privileges that William deliberately removed, something William would likely refuse. It would require asking Anne to halt her activities with the archives. She would almost certainly resist. Most critically, it would place Charles in the position of publicly defending the woman millions still associate with his first wife's suffering against both his heir and his sister. Sources indicate he recognizes the untenable political and personal cost of that stance, leaving him in a posture of pained awareness rather than decisive action. The weight of past actions rests most heavily and inescapably upon Charles, creating a deeply personal and moral dilemma that colors every aspect of the current situation. As the man who conducted the long-term affair with Camilla while still married to Diana, Charles was at the very center of the events that Diana later described in terms of profound emotional devastation and isolation. Witnessed, in many ways contributed to, the public scandals, separation, painful interviews, the ultimate breakdown that preceded Diana's tragic death. His history is not distant abstract history for him. His lived memory that now manifests in the determined actions of his son William and sister Anne. Charles understands, perhaps better than anyone, why William carries such deep feelings about his mother's suffering, why Anne has reached the point of acting on her long-held convictions. Attempting to mount a strong defense of Camilla's current position requires him to somehow navigate or downplay the very origins of that grief, task that lacks moral conviction when one bears significant responsibility for it. Sources close to the palace describe this as an extraordinarily burdensome position for a man in his later years, where spousal loyalty collides with the inescapable reality of past choices and their generational consequences. Weight does not lessen with time. Instead, seems to grow as the 30th anniversary of Diana's death approaches and as William, now a father himself, asserts greater control over the family's future direction. The intersection of duty and personal legacy forms one of the most profound and recurring tensions in royal existence. The current dynamics bring it into particularly sharp and uncomfortable focus. Monarchy as an institution demands unwavering commitment to continuity, public service, discretion and the collective image above individual concerns. Personal legacies, however, are forged through private decisions, relationships, their very human consequences, cannot be entirely erased or managed through protocol alone. Camilla's role as Queen Consort represents, for her supporters, a hard-won story of personal redemption, institutional acceptance, the triumph of love after decades of controversy. For others, including apparently Princess Anne and Prince William, revives painful questions about fairness, accountability, institutions' handling of Diana's documented suffering, and whose narrative ultimately shapes the historical record. Anne and William's efforts, through careful engagement with the royal archives and strategic use of financial and symbolic resources, appear designed to address this intersection with greater honesty and completeness, seem determined to ensure that personal legacies are not wholly subordinated to institutional smoothing, contribute to a fuller, more unredacted understanding of the past. This approach reflects a mature, reflective perspective. The monarchy's long-term strength and credibility actually depend on its willingness to engage honestly with difficult chapters, rather than seeking to perpetually contain or soften them for the comfort of the present moment. Tension between duty and legacy is unlikely to disappear. Instead, is being actively renegotiated in real time. Reflections on institutional evolution paint the British monarchy as a remarkably resilient yet slowly transforming entity, one that has survived centuries precisely because it possesses the capacity for careful, often invisible adaptation while maintaining the outward appearance of unbroken continuity. Current developments involving Princess Anne, Prince William, and Camilla Parker Bowles offer a compelling case study in how this evolution occurs in practice. Subtle shifts are taking place across multiple dimensions. Redistribution of patronages that once reinforced Camilla's position, quiet recalibration of access to events and resources under William's control of the Duchy of Cornwall, careful shaping of historical documentation and visual records of Charles III's reign, and Anne's reported engagement with the royal archives to ensure a more complete accounting of past events. These adjustments respond to several converging realities: advancing age and health challenges of the current monarch, natural assertion of authority by the heir apparent, generational differences in how duty and legacy are understood, and broader societal expectations for greater transparency and historical honesty. Camilla's experience within this evolving framework is particularly instructive. It represents a figure whose prominence bridges different eras of royal life, one shaped by the scandals and personal dramas of the late 20th century, now navigating the priorities of a more modern, future-oriented generation. The institution appears to be balancing reverence for tradition, pragmatic recognition that roles, influence, and public narratives must shift to remain credible. This evolution is characteristically discreet, folding through administrative decisions, private conversations, and strategic resource management rather than public announcements or dramatic ruptures. Its cumulative effect is significant, suggesting a monarchy thoughtfully repositioning itself for the challenges of the 21st century, preserving the essential dignity and ceremonial weight define its public identity. The process reflects maturity and long-term thinking rather than hasty reaction, acknowledging that true institutional strength lies in the ability to adapt without appearing to break. Unresolved path ahead stands as perhaps the most intriguing and uncertain chapter in this long-developing royal story, one that carries the accumulated weight of nearly 30 years of complex family and institutional history. Several critical factors will shape how events unfold in the coming months and years. Charles's health remains a central variable. 76 and continuing treatment for cancer, his capacity to steer or mediate these internal dynamics is necessarily limited. Approaching 30th anniversary of Diana's death in August 2027 will bring renewed public and private focus on her legacy, adding emotional intensity to William's perspective and actions. Anne's engagement with the royal archives and William's strategic use of the Duchy of Cornwall present two parallel efforts to influence both the historical record and the future distribution of power and resources. Camilla, positioned at the center of these currents, faces the steady erosion of her carefully constructed position through incremental rather than sudden changes. The palace ultimately documents Charles III's reign, family relationships are recalibrated, voices are given prominence in the official narrative. What access and influence Camilla retains after any succession will determine much about the monarchy's character in the decades to come. While Buckingham Palace continues to uphold its long-standing tradition of public silence and composed discretion, internal dynamics suggest a period of significant transition. It is not likely to resolve in one dramatic moment, but through the slow accumulation of decisions, reflections, and adjustments. Final contours remain open, dependent on the complex interplay of time, personal character, institutional imperatives, public sentiment, the enduring power of memory. Observers who have followed the royal family across decades feels like the natural culmination of tensions that have existed since the 1990s, moving toward some form of reckoning or rebalancing. The path ahead is not yet fixed, and its ultimate direction will reveal much about how the monarchy chooses to carry its past into the future.